This is Thoughts with C, J, and L.
A podcast by three Asian American people with thoughts on being Asian, American, and people.
In this episode, we're talking about introverts and extroverts.
Hi, everyone. So last episode, we kind of just started talking because we were really excited to talk about internal monologues because it's probably one of our go-to discussion topics when we're just hanging out. And so we were like, let's just go. But we figured before we started just talking today that we'd give a little bit more of an intro to season 3. I think a lot of the topics we want to talk about this season are just kind of topics like the internal monologues one, where if you just give us a prompt, we'll just start talking. And yeah, today, Introverts and Extroverts, it's another one that we always talk about and have a lot of opinions on. So get ready. And also, welcome to our new listeners. Woo!
Hi, Tilo.
Hi, Tilo.
Hello. Okay, so we're talking about introverts and extroverts today.
Okay, so we had some ideas, and then we started talking and thinking for a little bit, and now we have more ideas. So this is take 2 of us discussing introverts and extroverts. Yeah.
Okay, I figured we could start with this from Wikipedia definition and then go from there, just as like a starting point, and we can like debate the validity of this definition, etc. I'll read a chunk of this. The traits of extroversion and introversion are a central dimension in some human personality theories. They were both introduced into psychology by Carl Jung, although both popular understanding and current psychological usage vary. Extroversion tends to be manifested in outgoing, talkative, energetic behavior, whereas introversion is manifested in more reflective and reserved behavior. Extroversion and introversion are typically viewed as a single continuum, so to be high in one necessitates being low in the other. Jung provides a different perspective and suggests that everyone has both an extroverted side and an introverted side, with one being more dominant than the other. And then the rest of the page was just talking about how everybody took this original idea and then ran every other direction with it, which is what we're going to do probably.
Okay, right off the bat.
Yeah.
This might bring up another discussion point, but after you read it, I was really focused on the sentiment of the word behavior and what that means. Because if it's behavior,
Oh no.
does it matter what you internally feel? If you're just an outgoing person versus someone who's a little more reserved.
Wait, so Laha, are you saying that you don't think introversion and extroversion, like these terms, are necessary?
Well, like, is it just another word for outgoing versus reserved? In the sense that if it's just the behavior, then it's whatever you do, you're an extrovert or an introvert. Whereas I think we've been analyzing as to why people are outgoing or not outgoing, or their ability to go hang out with people.
We should outline why we think this topic is debatable in the first place. Just like some background, we always talk about this because we can't come to a conclusion of the definition of an introvert versus an extrovert.
Yeah, because whenever we talk about it, we're like, if I identify as an extrovert, but then all these, like some definitions or some parts of the definition don't really line up with me, then we question it. We question a lot of things.
Yeah, like in our first take, we were like, oh, why don't we go around and everybody say what they think they are, or, introvert versus extrovert? But it all kind of fell apart because then we were like, what does it mean to be an extrovert versus an introvert?
Yeah.
And then we didn't have a definition, and then it all fell apart.
There's no one definition out there either, because it's like in the definition that you read from Wikipedia, it says like the popular understanding and the current psychological usage vary. There's no agreement on what it actually means. And then so it's like when we were going around, it's like, oh, do we identify as one or the other, or we don't even know what this is?
Right. But then it's always tough because, one of those get to know each other intro questions that always get thrown around is like, oh, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So what does it mean?
I have a theory.
Yes.
My theory is that so there's like 4 terms that I'm thinking about that in popular understanding can all be meshed together. But I don't know. I personally think that these 4 factors are like all separate from each other. So like the 4 terms are introversion versus extroversion, quietness versus outgoing, confidence versus shyness or social anxiety. And then the 4th one is sensitivity versus insensitivity. And I feel like most people see me and they're like, oh, she's an introvert. But most of the time it's because it's based off of either I'm quiet or like I'm shy or sensitive. But I feel like all 4 of these things are separate. And I've been thinking a lot about the definition of each of these terms. I think the easiest term to define would be quietness versus outgoing. This spectrum describes how you appear on the outside. So whether or not you're like talking a lot or like you're the center of attention, that's how you're behaving on the outside. And I think that's where the term quietness or outgoing comes from, but it doesn't necessarily reflect anything that's going on in the inside. And then for shyness and social anxiety versus confidence, I think that this term has more to do with what you think of yourself and what your thoughts are when you are interacting with other people. Are you self-conscious? Are you thinking, oh, what does this person think of me? Do I belong here? That sort of thing. But that has no indication on whether or not you're quiet or outgoing on the outside, because there can be people who are confident and quiet, and there can also be people who are anxious and outgoing. That spectrum has more to do with what's going on in the inside. For sensitivity and insensitivity, I think the spectrum has more to do with how much stimulation you can take in. And so, like, someone who's more sensitive is unable to take as much stimulation as someone who's insensitive. I think that's another factor that's kind of an indication of what's going on inside your head or like how you function. But again, this has nothing to do with how you portray yourself on the outside, because you can be quiet or outgoing or whatever, despite being sensitive or insensitive. And then circling back to the first term, which is introversion versus extroversion, the common definition that I've heard getting thrown around is like how you recharge essentially. So like, do you recharge by being alone or with very few people, or do you recharge by being with people? But I don't know. I was talking to my mom about this, and I feel like the conclusion that we came to is just like the term introversion and extroversion. My theory is that it's just kind of like an umbrella term, and it's like has more to do with like how people view you on the outside. So it's just like based on all the other traits that you have generally, do you identify as an introvert or an extrovert based on these characteristics? So I don't think there's like one definition, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. I mean, I think that your 4-pronged theory is like reflective of the idea that like people are multidimensional, but it's also like it's similar to like the ENFTJ, whatever Myers-Briggs
Myers-Briggs.
concept. But like there's more than one way to define you as a person. And I think you're right that like extroversion and introversion are just ways to be like simply this. Like when we do intros and we say extroversion versus introversion, I'm not trying to learn about your whole life in that one intro. But I think a lot of time, like there's a lot of weight that's placed on these words when you're identifying as yourself, because then people just assume a bunch of things, which maybe this is just showing that we have a problem as a society when it comes to words. I don't know. But I like your theory because I think it checks out.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of all those other like scales that they use in surveys and stuff to measure other psych things like depression or anxiety scales, or where they ask you a bunch of questions and then they add up your answer, and then based off of your answer to like 5 or 6 questions, they give you your result. So I can see it being the sliding scale, because I think I've always been unsure about the introvert versus extrovert thing, because I'm like, well, in some ways I could be an introvert, but then in other ways I feel like you could make an argument for an extrovert. And so, you know, if you're like basing it off of all these different factors and everything slides out to be somewhere in the middle, then it's like, okay, it makes sense that you feel very much in the middle of the 2 definitions.
I was thinking about how we define depression and other mental illnesses. I don't know, I was thinking it's like kind of the same idea where for depression, one of the criteria for diagnosing depression is a list of symptoms. I think it's like 9 or something. And then you have to have a combination of 5 of them, but it can be like any 5. And then so for each person, it's different. And like the way that it manifests itself is also different. So I'm like thinking it's kind of the same idea for introversion, extroversion, where it's like you have these list of traits and like everyone has like a different combination. And then so like it looks different for each person, but it's just an umbrella term.
Did we solve our problem?
Well, I saw this thing where someone said that most people will identify as ambivert, where you're neither totally an introvert or totally an extrovert, which makes sense because it's such a broad term. And also, like, if we're thinking about society as a bell curve, like most people are going to be in the middle. Like, no one's going to be at the extreme of either end.
Like most things in life, it's probably best to be somewhere in the middle and to be balanced, because it's like we all need to be with people and to like talk to people if we're like focusing on the social aspect of it. But we also like it's healthy to be by yourself and to reflect on your own and be able to exist by yourself with yourself. But then this kind of goes into like if we're talking more about the specific social preference side of the introvert versus extrovert discussion, this kind of goes into Loho, your story. If you want to tell it.
Well, okay, I have 2 things. The first is that we act differently in different contexts. The extroversion might not come out in certain situations as opposed to like me in other situations, which is where the definition is just too simple for it to make sense to me. But I simplified the definition in my own terms. So basically, the definition is what you think is most fun. Hear me out, people. So, last week, I was like sad for some reason. And I was just like, what's going on? I just hung out with people. Like, I'm having a great time. Like, nothing's wrong in my life. And then I realized that I just wanted to hang out with people. And I thought that that would be something fun to do. And since I thought I had already hung out with people and I didn't want to like annoy more people or bother them, or like I don't have like a group here in DC yet, I kind of just hang out with individual people for the most part. And so I was like, I don't have this thing that I want, which is why I'm sad. And the thing that I wanted was to hang out with other people because I think that would be fun in the moment. And when I wasn't with people, I was pretty sad because I had all this energy of wanting to interact with people, but it couldn't go anywhere. And so that kind of bottled up and manifested into anxiety and like sadness instead. So then I was like, I'm just like a dog where like, I like dogs just want to hang out with people all the time. When you think of a dog, like an animal that wags its tail a bunch and always wants to play with you, that's your stereotype of dogs. Whereas with cats, your stereotype is they're chill. They just hang around and do whatever they want. They're pretty independent. Because I'm not saying, don't cancel me, that all dogs and cats act that way. But for the most part, the stereotype is that. So what did you guys think of this when I texted you about it? Because we were kind of blowing up the group chat, thinking we cracked the code.
For context, Rojo just started texting in our group chat. She's like, I think I'm an extrovert, guys.
This was after we filmed the first chaos incoherent version of Introverts and Extroverts. And we were like, what did we just talk about for an hour?
And then when I was there ruminating in my sadness and lack of friends, I was like, wait, is my need right now to hang out with people the definition of being an extrovert? And then I texted them. And then also because I was texting Jam separately and I was like, man, I just want to be people's friends. You know, I want to find a group. And then I was like, I think I'm an extrovert. And then I immediately switched into a group chat and I was like, guys, I'm an extrovert. But what were your initial reactions once I brought up this point?
I thought you cracked it. I was in total agreement. Okay, because if we frame the social extrovert introvert aspect of it around the idea of fun, then it makes sense because it's like for some people, hanging out is just a fun thing, like a hobby. You know how you just do things for fun and it's fun for some people, but it's not fun for other people. But it's like we all have things that we like and we don't like. I guess for some people, it's a lot of fun to hang out with larger groups of people. And then for other people, it's more fun to hang out with smaller groups of people or to just spend time alone. But then because we're people, we need both at some point. You know, if your preference is to hang out with people and to have fun that way, it's not that you like don't need to spend any time by yourself, because I feel like if we're thinking about the bell curve thing, it's probably healthy to like need both, but then to like want more of one versus the other is probably just a personal preference thing. If you have more fun with more people, then you're probably more of an extrovert. And then if you have more fun with less people or on your own, then you're maybe more of an introvert.
We're going to have to preface to like, it is important to note the type of people you're hanging out with or like the situation. But like, if you have had your ideal situations, then like you would want to hang out with more people as an extrovert. It's not always like, oh, I just want to hang out with any person. It's just hanging out with people.
But when you say like hang out with more people, are you saying like hang out with a larger group of people or just more people in general?
I think just people in general.
Because I feel like if we're already specifying like, oh, you're hanging out with people that you click with, I feel like I could hang out with people for a really long time. Yeah. I've never been called an extrovert.
Maybe it is number of people then. This kind of goes back to, I think, what we were saying in the first recording, or at least what I was saying in the recording of your threshold of people is different. I could probably take on more people that I don't know as much, whereas other people might have like a niche or a smaller group of people that they could hang out with. So like my idea of fun is broader.
I think for me, it's both duration and people, because I think I do hit points, like even with my family, now that I'm an independent adult, where I'm like, I cannot anymore. I just need to like lock myself in a room and hear myself think. I think regardless of person, I do eventually hit a point where I'm like, I cannot go on. Then there are definitely people who, you know, I can spend a lot more time with and not as much time with, but I feel like it's a combination of both for me.
Okay, so x-axis, y-axis of people and time. And then the point is your optimal funness.
Okay, I no, it's definitely like two axes, because I actually think there's a lot more people that I can like handle for a short duration of time than there are like, okay, if the x-axis is duration and the y-axis is number of people, I think I would be somewhere in the top left.
Say that again.
If x if x is duration, so the more to the left you are, the less time, and then the more to the right you are, the more time. And then if y is people, so the more close to the top you are, the more people, and then the more close to the bottom you are, the less people. I'd probably put myself middle left, so less people and no, less time, but a middle amount of people.
That you can handle at a time.
Yeah.
So does that assume though that you can like shade everything that's lower on both ends and say that is also an acceptable amount of people to hang out with?
Wait, what do you mean?
So like wherever your point is, right? So middle, you say middle left.
Mm-hmm.
So everything more to the left and then below that point in terms of duration and people, could you handle?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I would say like sometimes the highest number of people that I could take probably isn't all the time, but everything below that is acceptable. Does that make sense? Should we draw it out?
Wait, I have a sticky note.
Should this be your Instagram tile?
Wait, okay. Oh my gosh, bringing out my math skills. Okay.
You majored in statistics, people.
So oh no, I drew it backwards.
Yes.
No, it's good.
It's fine. Okay, so this is time. Oh my gosh, I even put time on the x-axis. Wow, look at me.
Okay, everybody at home, since you can't see this, take out a sticky note and a pen.
So time, number of people. I would put myself somewhere like here. So this is like lots of people, no time, lots of time. I would put myself in like an average amount of people, but or actually it should be a line. It shouldn't be a point, because it's like the more number of people, the less time I can do. So it should be like this. It should be a line. It shouldn't be a point.
See, but then I think for some other people, it could go the other direction.
Could it? I don't think so, because then you would then because oh my gosh.
And the number of people you
'cause
can
it's like
handle
the
is infinite.
yeah, because we're looking at the area under the curve.
Supply and demand, baby.
And then so then some people they would be like this. Oh my gosh, look at me.
Different color pen coming out.
Yeah, see? Some people would be like that with a red, you know?
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah,
I see.
you got
Yeah.
so you couldn't go the other way because then you would have an
It's this.
infinite.
This.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
looking at
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what the conclusion of that is.
I don't know. Are we still using the terms introverts versus extroverts? Because then based on the graph, it's like, okay, at what point do you call someone an introvert and someone an extrovert?
Okay, so if the theory that JMU started with is like, those scales, and then you use those collectively to come up with whether or not someone is an introvert or an extrovert, this could be like another method, the number of people versus time. And then you calculate the area under the curve. And then it's like another metric that you could use looking at it from a different way.
And then the area under the curve qualifies you as either an introvert or an extrovert. So if you have 25 centimeters squared, you're an extrovert.
And then you could plot everybody's area on a distribution and then figure out, if someone's an extreme extrovert, they probably have a lot of it.
That's going wild.
Think of all the data you can collect. And then you have, like, in this survey, you have people say how they identify and then see if it matches up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Time to write an R01.
Wait, I have a question. If we're talking about the area under the curve, but what we were talking about before is your preference, right? So it's like within the triangle area, you still have a preference between where you're at in the triangle, right? Because like what Loho was describing before was that she preferred to be with people, and then when she wasn't, she was sad. And then so like her point would be, at least at that point in time, would be like closer to the line that you drew. So it's not like the area under the curve, it's not all evenly distributed, right? It's like not like, oh, anywhere in the area is completely fine.
Yeah, I actually feel like now I'm thinking about data visualization. I feel
Maybe
like
you can, like, shade them different colors. Like, the darker the shade, the more of a need it is for you to hang out with anybody, or
Wait, so right, but it's just like where your point is, or like where you want your point to be is not like as long as it's under the curve, it's fine, right?
no, it could.
Because like when you were like, oh, when I wasn't hanging out with people, I was sad. At that point in time, you're hanging out by yourself. So you're under the curve, but you wanted to be closer to the line that we drew on the graph, right? Because you wanted to hang out with people.
Yeah. But I guess too, for me, I could have hung out with anybody, like not anybody, but like I could have hung out with like one more person. I think that would have been enough,
But then it's just like you weren't okay with being by yourself.
I guess.
wait, I feel like there's something wrong with the model. It's not capturing.
This is how science works.
Accurately. Okay, here's another point. I think this way of measuring introverts and extroverts is more based off of preference, and then the way that you started Jam is more based off of just how you are, your like intrinsic characteristics.
Yeah, because I feel like I'm also thinking about what's your reason behind needing to spend time with people versus needing to spend time alone. Because for an extrovert, for example, I think it's one situation where you want to hang out with people because, well, I feel like it kind of goes back to what I was saying, like with confidence versus like social anxiety and sensitivity versus insensitivity, because those two traits kind of describe what's going on in your head. And then for an extrovert, for example, I'm thinking, okay, if you feel a need to go out and see people, I feel like it's one situation if you want to go out because you feel anxious by yourself or you feel insecure versus if you're going out because you want more stimulation or something. And then the opposite is true too. Like for an introvert, do you feel the need to spend time by yourself because you're anxious around people, or do you feel the need to be by yourself because you're overstimulated?
Yeah, maybe it's just my ADHD being like, you need stimulation.
Because I mean, I've definitely felt the need to be with people and the need to be by myself.
Mhm.
I feel like everyone has.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So maybe if we're going back to this area under the curve thing, the exclusion that we make is that this isn't talking about times when you feel like you need to hang out and times where you don't. It's just like when you want to.
People are too complex. That's our new theory for this season. It's just
Because I feel like the need to hang out doesn't necessarily have to do with personal preference.
Wait, I think it does though.
Wait, okay, why do you think it does?
Well, preference and need are also on the spectrum. Why do you prefer one thing over the other? What's the reasoning behind that? It reflects something. If you were pushed to like an extreme, I feel like a preference can turn into a need.
Okay, I feel like if you're pushed to an extreme, your preferences can turn into a need, but they can also flip. This is like an undergrad student life example, but like you're studying a lot, stressed about exams or whatever, and then you're done and it's time to de stress. I feel like I could see myself, depending on how things went and what I was up to, like the week leading up to being done, either wanting to or needing to be alone to de stress and to decompress, or needing to be with people to be like, I'm just not gonna like whatever. For me, it could go either way, even though I feel like my usual preference at the end of like a busy week is to de-stress by myself. But if it was like a really exceptionally tough week, I could see it going either way.
See, but that's like the context of a busy week. If it's not a busy, like if you were on vacation or something, the context changes all the time. There's too many contexts. I don't know.
So we shouldn't have this discussion.
Like I mean, maybe it's the more context in which you would rather hang out with people. Like if there are less times where you would want to actually hang out with people, maybe that's introversion.
But then it goes back to like who are you hanging out with and how many people are you hanging out with, right? And then it
Why
circles back to our graph.
That's why Jung kept it simple. Like two terms, very umbrella. That's it.
Do we have any conclusions?
In conclusion, don't sweat it. Just do what you want to do, you know? If you feel sad and you want to hang out with people, go hang out with people. It's not a problem. You're fine. You don't need to go to therapy.
No, you should go to therapy.
No, I really do. I need to find one.
I feel like it's definitely healthy to need both because we're people, we're social creatures, but we're also individuals. So needing both is probably, it makes sense. Yeah.
Or is it like how you make those connections? What gives you the most fulfillment out of a social situation?
Wait, what do you mean?
So, like for me, I feel like generally speaking, I prefer to hang out with people one on one or like in a really small group because that interaction for me feels more meaningful because I feel like I can get to know them better than if we were all in a big group. A lot of times when I'm in a big group, I feel like I'm not getting to know anyone. So, like that kind of interaction doesn't feel as meaningful for me. But it's like either way, like I want to connect with people, but it's just the way I connect with people. But I don't know, maybe for Loho, maybe she finds more fulfillment hanging out with a big group of people.
I feel like I've never been a big group person. I also prefer smaller groups, but I don't know. Maybe that also kind of has to do with the triangle and the number of people thing.
Should we make another graph?
I think it would just be number of people and then something else on the x-axis instead of time.
Enjoyment.
Yeah, or like depth of conversation.
But I like both. Like shallow conversations, so good. But then clearly, like I have a podcast for this, so. But what's the definition of shallow conversations? Is it, oh my gosh, Shawn Mendes is an idiot? Or is it small talk?
I have a really low tolerance for small talk. Or I think I struggle to get to know people in small talk conversations. Mainly because one of the criteria I have for people that I kind of like to hang out with is being able to have nuanced opinions. And so when you small talk, stuff like that never comes up. And I don't know what people actually think. And I don't know, a lot of It's fine. I don't know.
Do you want to explain how you get to know people, like with your questions?
I think we should save that for another episode.
Yeah.
Kat doesn't want to have herself out yet.
I haven't had to get to know somebody new in a really long time, though. So I don't even know if my skills are still what they used to be.
I'm sure they're great.
Before we go, what if we go around and say if we think we're an extrovert or an introvert?
Sure.
Let's go around and say what we think we are and see if other people agree. I'll start off because I think mine's probably the easiest. I think I'm an extrovert. If we had to choose one, either extrovert or introvert, that's it. Those are only two options. It's binary.
Okay. I agree. I think you're an extrovert. I've always thought you were an extrovert.
Yeah, I agree too.
Thank you.
I don't know, just thinking about the number of people you can handle at a time, that never ceases to amaze me.
Guys, I think, okay, the key to life truly is to treat everything like a meme. Your life gets like exponentially better if everything is a meme.
I agree.
Popcorn jam.
I would say I'm an introvert.
To which I would agree. Based on the way that I understand it as a social construct in the general sense. Yes.
Yeah, everything is a social construct.
As a self-proclaimed friend of jam, close friend of jam, I agree.
I agree as well. Yes, if we have to choose, I think I'm an introvert.
That's interesting though, because like, didn't you say like your Myers-Briggs, you always came out as an extrovert?
Yes, I've never gotten any of the I's in my 10 years of periodically taking the Myers-Briggs test.
You've been taking this test for 10 years?
Since high school.
2012. I was watching a TED Talk today from 2012, and I was like, that's 10 years ago.
All of my letters have flipped at some point, except for the E. I've never gotten an I a single time.
Their test is flawed.
I know it is.
See, I think, okay, if it's binary, you're an introvert, but really you're like very much so hovering right down the middle.
I think so, yeah. Based off of your scales, Jam, I think where I fall on those different things might push me more towards extroversion. But then if we like think about the personal preference triangle, I'm probably more of an introvert. And so I'm going with my personal preference vibes.
Kat is a self-proclaimed introvert.
Yes.
So TLDR, we need a model for all of these factors.
Somebody send us some research money and we'll get to the bottom of this.
See, my TLDR is that we should not worry about it anymore and just do whatever vibes feel right for us.
No more are you an introvert or an extrovert as small talk.
Because literally, like, you can't learn about anybody in that sense. Or like you don't learn as much as you think you do. People are complex beings, okay? That's why fun facts should stick to very like stupid things. I guess extroversion's kind of stupid.
My TLDR is I think we did a pretty good job breaking this down.
Just a little treat for our viewers as a way to think about things.
We did better than last time. Last time we started recording at 7:30 a.m.
Yeah, and it was not a good time. Like my brain was like, we're gonna put out the stupidest takes you have. And they're not gonna make any sense.
No, this is good. Based off of what I started editing in the other one versus what we just taped, like so good. Some quality content for our listeners.
We'll see how they think.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes, let us know. Let us know what you think. And if you're an introvert or an extrovert.
Follow us on Instagram at thoughtswcjl.
Yes. Our Instagram has some sick art on it now.
Yeah, go support the Stonehead. on
Yes.
kimchi.
If you support Asian American media, check out our Instagram.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye, Jane.
Bye, Jane.
Bye, Jane.